is evidence credible, which is really what we're talking about here. Does the evidence include citations of textual authorities in the field? So as you're looking at the person's essay who you're reading, or you're looking back at your own, do you see those citations, those parenthetical citations? Where it has the whole parentheses and Barron in there or something. Is it credible? Is it scholarly kind of thing, right? Are they talking about, sometimes some people will write, they'll use evidence from something like the BBC, right? But they might not tell us they're using the BBC to talk about newsmakers. So they might just use it as like the end-all source to like the best information in the world, which makes us question it a little more. But if Heather's paper says, now the BBC, is a source that's doing all this journalistic work and we're looking at it more specifically as the right kind of source for that discussion. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So think about how evidence is credible and how it's relevant, like what you chose is relevant to what you're talking about. Is the evidence explicitly connected to the paragraph, topic, or thesis? Underline this one in your sheet for sure. Evidence explicitly connected to the topic, to the paragraph, topic, or thesis. This we're going to look for. Put a big star. Do you see sentences in the body paragraphs that connect back and tell you why this evidence was there and how it somehow teaches us something about what's being promised in the thesis? Okay. This is also really about the argument, but this is where argument and analysis just get so tied up together. Is evidence well developed? Meaning fully interpreted, not superficial. How do you notice this one? How are you going to find this one? I'm going to give you a tip. I'll give you a little strategy. While you're reading the papers and looking over your own, look for the quotes. Look for the sources that have been cited. Right? Look for Barron says. Or statistics show. And then some kind of parentheses, right, around the source, Lee, for example. Look for those first to identify the evidence as when you're shortcut reading. Once you look at those, ask yourself, okay, did they interpret it and develop it? Meaning, did they explain it afterwards? Did they use a quote sandwich? What we really don't want to see, in most cases, is we don't want to see a paragraph that ends with a quote. In most cases, not all, in most cases, if there's a quote at the end of the paragraph, it probably indicates that they haven't explained why that piece of evidence, because it's probably their evidence, matters. They haven't probably elaborated on it, which means they haven't analyzed it, or connected it back to the thesis. So look for those as your indicators. These will help you assess other people's writing and your own. Is the evidence sufficient? Enough offered? This is also kind of numbers, right? Do you have enough sources? Okay. No wild claims. What are wild claims? Maybe we could have a, what's that? Opinions, okay. What might one look like, for example, in relation to your topic? And tell us your topic is it handwriting still or grammar?
Yeah. Technology affects every part of handwriting.
Yeah, technology affects every part of handwriting. The key here to the wild claim is often, here's your tip and strategy, every. Everyone, no one, anything. All the time, anything. It's these big generalization words that kind of signal that it's impossible generally that something is everyone. I mean, there might be some examples, but, watch out for those words. Anytime you say everyone, you almost will always see a little question mark next to it with my comment saying, really? Everyone? Okay. Everything will get you in trouble every time. Almost. See, I even used the almost. I threw in the qualifier, almost, often. Okay. So watch for these things to avoid wild claims. And they often look like opinion, but they also they go further than just opinion. They go to that broad generalization, which really screws up your argument because it starts making it look like you don't have credibility and you might actually not know what you're talking about because you're going way too far. You're going way too far. Don't go way too far. Okay, is the evidence logical and analytical? Okay, not a mere retelling of sources' contents. That's also kind of that same discussion about summary, right? But logical and analytical is that unpacking, where you're not just telling us about what Barron said and why he said it, but you're also kind of showing how if Barron says A and A is true, then we can surmise that B is possibly true. If Barron's suggestion that handwriting is disappearing because we don't teach it in schools, and we can see from studies of what's taught in schools, right, that it's not being taught very often, and we can see from Turkle's study that handwriting helps us learn and remember things, right? Because Teresa's going to borrow some of Natasha's paper. Then we can put this all together and figure out that, in fact, we need to possibly reconsider whether or not we teach handwriting in school. That handwriting is really important to learning, and it's not just about having a pretty signature or something. And you can see how those are like A, B, C. They all fit together in some analytical order. It's not just summarizing what people have said. It's connecting all the dots to make your own argument. Is the evidence sound and reason-based? Not based on personal opinion. You can see that personal opinion kind of gets connected with the wild claims. But personal opinion, can you give us a personal opinion one about one of your papers? What would be an opinion one? Can anyone think of what would be an opinion about your topic?
I think people are becoming more stupid.
What's that?
I think people are becoming more stupid because they're not taking the time to do like little things like spelling like little words correct and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So I think so. You've also got that's the other thing you want to watch for with personal opinion. Words like I think.
Or
I know. I feel. I believe. Now, these aren't always incorrect. I mean, you could say things like, I argue, I suggest. We use I a lot in academic writing, but we stay away from the mushier words that are kind of around emotional response. And we have a tendency to say things more like, I posit, I argue, I interpret. There's a different kind of, it's like a logic-based argument somehow. But yeah, I think people are becoming stupid because they are using texting, writing in their school papers or something. Once we start also making personal attacks, we've definitely got in personal opinion territory, right? But you could see where it starts when you start with this I think, I feel, I believe. I believe that if we don't fix the e-waste problem, we're all going to die and we're going to hell in a handbasket. That's another one of those, right? Christy was dealing with this same struggle, right? How do you make an argument around environmental issues and social issues that you feel really passionate about without going too far and getting really into the opinion? It's a very fine line and it's a slippery slope. So watch for those kinds of things in your writing, in the I feels, I believes, and kind of tell us what the evidence is showing. Tell us that the evidence and the studies suggest something and that research needs to be done, or there needs to be, if you're going to have a needs to be, it needs to be around how we continue to have a conversation more so than getting out there with our picket signs at the end of the street. Okay. Is the evidence, is the discussion appropriately complex? So acknowledging alternative views and making concessions, what does that look like? Go for it, Zoe.
Is
Mm-hmm.
You have an argument that you'd like to make against another argument, and you're saying that I'm allowing another argument to be out there.
Yeah, and for some of you, that's going to be, you're looking at something that's highly debated. And so if it's debated, the first way to say is, it's kind of like I agree to disagree with the other side. And I recognize, the key is to say I recognize, this is concessions, I recognize the other side exists. And I recognize it has value. But it isn't as logical as my argument, and here is why. So you're making space, and sometimes you're making space in a way that's like, sure, this argument makes a lot of sense, however, it doesn't take account of this part, right? So sometimes you're pointing out that something's just missing from their argument, so it gives you a space, okay? Sometimes it could be that it's just a highly contested thing, and you can talk about it being contested. The other thing is appropriately complex and alternate views is to point out that it's not often just a yes or no, black or white, pros and cons, good and bad, but it might be more complex. Like the thing around handwriting might be around how people learn through using their body, body motion helps us with our brain. It also might be how handwriting is about trust. And it's also about how people represent style. That those are different kinds of issues around handwriting. So they become more complex. They're not just handwriting is good or bad. Okay. And then last one, does evidence show reading comprehension and close reading? How do you know if you've seen that or what to look for in that? What is that? What might that be signaling?
They can explain their quotes.
Okay.
And it's not something that it looks like it correlates to what they're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
They're using quotes that have merit to what they're trying to argue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's kind of two things. One, look for quotes. That's often where you're going to see it, or a paraphrase, right, a citation. If the person is doing close reading, they're often unpacking and explaining the quote. But then the other part about reading comprehension is, one, have they actually interpreted it correctly? Which sometimes there's a statement that says something like, handwriting is really important for memory. However, it doesn't really, studies don't show that it makes a difference. And then the person uses it to show that handwriting is important because they missed the however. Not saying this is in Teresa's paper or anything. I'm just throwing this out as an example because we're using the handwriting example. But if there was a part where she used a quote, for example, that said handwriting, is good, however, and you use the support of use the evidence to support something that's not your argument. Well, that's a reading comprehension issue. And the other one is correlating with relevant examples. Are the examples you're using, your citations, your quotes, are they connected to what you're talking about? So did you pick a quote where Barron talks about handwriting and memory, but then your whole paragraph is actually about handwriting and personal expression? So in that case, then you're actually you're not correlating in your close reading correctly. And that's also use of evidence. So those are the kind of things we're going to look for, okay? We're going to look for appropriate evidence, but mostly we want to know, does the evidence explicitly connect to the paragraph, topic, or thesis? Is it well developed? Do we see them explaining it and talking about their quotes? Is it, we're watching for things like wild claims and logic, personal opinion. Those might catch us, and if they do, we'll point them out. We also want to see, though, if it's complex. We want to know, are they kind of showing multiple things going on? And are they showing that they understood what they're reading? And if you're reading somebody's paper that's related to your topic, you might have read the same stuff. So you might already have an in.